I'll give the high level here about where people run into trouble. There's many different angles, but here's the headline. The easiest way to explain this comes from the myth of Medusa. Actually, I found it to be the most helpful. Some of you will know, most of you know, Medusa is this amazing I think of a superhero who has this power of, when you look directly into her eyes, you freeze, you turn to stone. And in the myth, we have Perseus, who's tasked with defeating Medusa and goes to Athena, the goddess of knowledge. And Athena says, if you look at Medusa directly, you're going to freeze, you'll turn to stone. So what you need is a shield. And Peter Levine, who many of you will know from somatic experiencing, really well-known trauma specialist, he basically said, trauma is very much like Medusa. And you can't go right at trauma. And in a more technical way, what that means is when you're doing a session with someone, you don't ask them to just pay direct attention to traumatic stimuli, meaning sensations, thoughts, flashbacks, etc. Because what Levine said is, if you pay too much attention to traumatic stimuli, you freeze, you turn to stone, you can become immobilized. And that's why in a session, Dre, I wonder if you had this experience in your work. When I went into my trauma sessions, they didn't start by asking about trauma. They didn't say, tell me all about your trauma. Instead, the trauma therapist I saw said, tell me what's working in your life. And I was like, I don't want to talk about what's working. I'm paying a lot of money to be in this session. And the person said, I'll never forget it. They said, your capacity to be with what's working is going to support you to be with what's hard. And I'll never forget that. And that's the headline with trauma, is you can't just go right at it, or you can become frozen and re-traumatized, overwhelmed. So why does this matter for us then? So the other thing that Levine noticed is that people who are traumatized will tend to reflexively orient or pay attention to traumatic stimuli. So I'll give a personal example. I grew up in a house where there was, the safest way for me to get through it was to stay quite small and to hide. And that meant my lungs were very tight. So when I started meditating, the first thing I often felt was tight, collapsed lungs. And when I felt that, even though I was trying to pay attention to the breath at my nostrils, my attention would immediately go there because it felt like something's wrong. This is what was connected to some trauma for me. So anyone who's experiencing trauma will tend to naturally put their attention on elements of trauma. Again, that could be flashbacks, sensations. It could also be external reminders. So for example, a street corner, a smell. You might have had the experience where you become very sensitized to a smell because you had a bad experience or for any reason. So as a way to try to take care of our safety, we become sensitized and we will automatically reflexively orient to traumatic stimuli. Okay, so Medusa and then reflexive orientation. Basically, we will reflexively look at Medusa. So just then, if that holds water for you, what I'm saying, imagine the setup in meditation. So you're someone who's struggling with trauma, say, you come to meditation without knowing any better, you just start paying attention to what's dysregulating. If you don't know any better, you just keep following basic instructions and you don't do things to modulate the intensity of practice. You just keep hanging in with it. And at worst, someone is just looking at Medusa over and over and they can freeze. They can become re-traumatized. So because of that, and because meditation is so intense, we as mindfulness practitioners or as clinicians, whatever role you're in, the myth here, or the headline is offering people shields. We want to give people and empower them with practices to help them avoid this pitfall, avoid this trap. And, 4 or 5 years ago, when I started teaching more publicly about this, I was just trying to wave the flag to people who were meditation teachers who were like kind of like a hammer and everything was a nail. Like, just take it back to the cushion, take it back to the cushion. That's changed. And I know, Sean, we talked about that. You've talked about trauma, and this has been a part of this work here. So I don't think that'll be new for this group. But then to me, the path that we can go on, and when I'm training people, it's about the tools. I would want you to have, 20 to 60 tools. Honestly, about that number that you could bring in at any moment, and you could go, okay, let's try this, all in the service of someone's meditation practice. Maybe they shouldn't meditate. That's fine. But otherwise, if we can help them to be in practice, then all the better. So that's the headline of the setup. There's a lot more I could say, but we need to offer people a shield. Sean, anything you want to add? Because I know this is just part of your work here, or any questions that we want to talk to here?